A millionairess talks a man down from a bridge, only for him to reveal her husband's second family and the fortune he stole to keep them hidden. Vivian Cole's Prada heels skidded on wet concrete as she lunged for the man's arm. "Think of your family," she pleaded. His laugh was bitter. "That's rich coming from you, stepmom." When he turned, she saw her husband's eyes staring back, 20 years younger. Rain fell in sheets, blurring the city skyline through the thick fog rolling off the river. Vivian's diamond ring, her husband's "I'm sorry I missed our anniversary" gift, cut into her finger as she gripped the bridge railing. She'd been walking home from another solo dinner when she spotted him, a gaunt figure clinging to the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge. "Let me help you," Vivian said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. Luca ran a hand through his damp hair. "My mother taught me that one," he said, quoting Keats as he clung to the railing. "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." Vivian flinched. That was the poem her husband had supposedly written for her on their wedding day, a detail she had shared with no one but him. The ring on her finger, a flawless 5-carat diamond that had worn a raw patch on her skin from constant twisting, suddenly felt like a brand. When the police arrived, Luca pressed a faded photo into Vivian's palm before they led him away. It was her wedding day, her in the ivory gown, her husband in his tuxedo, but someone had carefully cropped out a ghostly figure standing just behind them. On the back, in faded ink, "Same church, 3 years prior." Back in her penthouse apartment, Vivian stared at the photo until her phone buzzed with a bank alert. $2.7 million transferred to Cayman Islands today. Her husband was supposed to be in London on business. Luca sat across from her at a cafe 2 days later, his threadbare jacket incongruous against the plush velvet seats. She looked healthier already. She'd arranged for a meal voucher at the shelter where they had placed him. "You don't have to thank me," Vivian said, twisting her ring. "I just couldn't stand by and watch someone jump." Luca studied her. "You recognized me, didn't you, at the bridge?" Vivian hesitated. "Your eyes, they're identical to Richard's." "Richard doesn't have eyes," Luca said quietly. "He has mirrors. He reflects whatever people want to see." He slid a folded paper across the table. "I found this in his desk when I was cleaning his office last summer, before he fired me." It was a birth certificate. Luca Richard Moretti, born to Elena Moretti. Father, Richard Cole. Vivian's hands shook. "How many?" Luca said, 12. 12 families. 3 continents. My mother was the first. She died 2 years ago. Cancer, untreated, because Richard cut off her medical payments when she threatened to expose him. Vivian thought of her wedding day, the carefully curated guest list, the exclusive church. "That photo, your mother was there? At your wedding?" Luca nodded. She came to confront him. He told her he'd kill her if she ever showed her face near us again. So she stood in the back, watching the woman who'd stolen her husband take her place. Vivian's phone buzzed again, a notification from her foundation's accounting department. "He's moving more money," she whispered. Luca's expression hardened. "Let me help you. I know where Dad hides things." Vivian's foundation office was a fortress of glass and steel. Luca sat at her husband's desk, typing furiously. "Your husband was brilliant," Luca said. "He created shell companies within shell companies, but he always made the same mistake. He used the same pattern." Vivian watched as Luca navigated through layers of financial obfuscation. "Here," he said, pulling up a document. "The orphanages you've been funding for the past 10 years, they don't exist. Or rather, they do, but they're not orphanages. They're homes for his other families." Vivian stared at the screen. There it was, her foundation's funds channeled through a series of intermediaries, ending up in accounts for properties across Europe and Asia, properties registered to women with different surnames but the same birthday, March 15th. March 15th was my wedding day, Vivian whispered. And my mother's, Luca said. He married each of them on the same day, different years, same day. Vivian thought of her raw patch on her finger from twisting her ring, the sleepless nights wondering why her husband was always traveling. All those years, she'd thought she was the only one. Her phone rang. It was Richard. "Darling, I'm heading home early. Missed you terribly." Vivian looked at Luca, who mouthed, "Put it on speaker." "Richard," she said, her voice steady, "I was just reviewing the Foundation's accounts with Luca." Silence. Then, "Who? Luca who?" "Your son, from Elena Moretti, the woman who was at our wedding." The line went dead.
Elena Moretti sat across from them in a modest apartment in Queens, her hands trembling as she placed the stack of documents on the table. She looked nothing like the ghostly figure in Vivian's wedding photo. Time and grief had aged her beyond her years, but her eyes held the same quiet strength. "I tried to tell you," Elena said to Vivian, "after the wedding, but Richard had already convinced you he was a widower, hadn't he? Told you his first wife died in childbirth?" Vivian nodded, remembering the story that had made her fall for him, the grieving man who'd lost his young wife, the child who hadn't survived. Elena handed her a birth certificate. "That child lived. He's Luca. Richard forged the death certificate." Vivian's vision blurred. "My marriage? It was never legal?" Elena shook her head. "Richard never divorced me. He just disappeared, changed his name, started over. You weren't his second wife, Vivian. You were his third, or fourth. I lost count." Vivian thought of the raw patch on her finger, the years of twisting her ring as she waited for a husband who'd never truly been hers. "What do I do?" Elena placed a key in Vivian's palm. "Your prenup is void, but his safe deposit box might interest you. It contains the real marriage licenses, the ones he forged to make each of us believe we were the only one." The bank manager eyed Luca suspiciously as they approached the safety deposit box. "Mr. Cole specified only he could access this box?" Luca smiled, the same charming smile Vivian had seen Richard use 100 times. "I have the key, and I have this." He slid a document across the counter, a court order Luca had somehow obtained overnight. Inside the box, they found 12 marriage licenses, each more elaborate than the last, and a ledger. Vivian flipped through the pages, her stomach churning. There it was. Every penny Richard had stolen from her trust fund, her inheritance, the Foundation's accounts. Millions funneled to support his other families, his other lives. But there was something else, a folder labeled Keats. Inside was a first edition collection of Keats' poetry, the same one Richard had given Vivian as an anniversary gift, claiming he'd spent a fortune to acquire it for her. Luca's hands shook as he opened it. On the inside cover, in elegant script, "To my dearest Elena, with all my love, 1998. "He stole it from my mother," Luca whispered. "She'd inherited it from her grandmother. He took it the night he left us." Vivian thought of all the times she'd treasured this book, believing it was proof of her husband's love. "I'm so sorry." Luca closed the book gently. "It was never yours to be sorry for. He stole from both of us." Vivian stood before the board of her foundation, Luca at her side. The room buzzed with speculation. Why had she called this emergency meeting? "Over the past decade," Vivian began, "my foundation has donated approximately $47 million to support children in need. What you don't know is that those children were Richard Cole's, my husband's, 12 other children with 11 other women. Gasps filled the room. Richard was a con artist, Vivian continued. He married me under false pretenses, stole my inheritance, and used my foundation to fund his other families. But those children are innocent. They deserve the support they've been receiving. She placed the document on the table. I'm liquidating all my personal assets to create a trust for these children. Each will receive education funding, health care, and housing support until they're 25. The board chairman cleared his throat. And what about the foundation? Vivian glanced at Luca, who nodded. The foundation will continue, but with a new mission. We'll focus on supporting victims of financial fraud and identity theft, people like me, who trusted the wrong person. After the meeting, Luca handed her a check. I found something else in Richard's accounts. He set up a separate trust for you, the real one. He always planned to leave you well off, even as he was stealing from you. Vivian looked at the amount, more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Why would he do that? Because even monsters have moments of conscience. Or maybe he just didn't want you to suffer as much as the others. 6 months later, Vivian stood on the steps of the courthouse, watching as Luca finalized the trust documents for the 12 children. The Keats collection sat in her bag, a gift from Luca, who'd reclaimed it from the authorities. You don't have to do this, Luca said as they walked away from the courthouse. You could have kept everything for yourself. Vivian shook her head. Richard stole from me for 15 years, but he also gave me something valuable, the knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever knew. She reached for her ring, the diamond that had worn a raw patch on her finger from years of twisting. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to twist it. Instead, she slid it off slowly, the pale circle underneath catching the sunlight. The ring felt heavy in her palm, the weight of 15 years of lies, of pretending, of waiting for a love that had never existed. But as she dropped it into the donation box for the courthouse's domestic violence program, she felt lighter than she had in decades. At the courthouse steps, Vivian finally removed her ring. The pale circle underneath looked less like a scar and more like a fresh start.